Hey guys, it's Mark over at Marietta Laptops, and I just wanted to share with you before I put this back together. This, as you can see, is the DC input board for an HP laptop. Now the rest of this comes apart in pieces. So this is actually the core of the issue. Very hard to see. But that little tiny silver dot in the middle there is actually the center post. Now when you mess up the jack on a laptop, what tends to happen is that center post will in some way separate or crack. If you're very lucky, it'll just pop up off the solder point on the board, which will be this center one down here at the bottom. Let's see if I can get that to be a little clearer. This center one down here at the bottom. And on this particular one, this happened. That's the rest of that center post. So what we've got to do is go ahead and take the entire thing apart. That's why it comes apart into a few more of these pieces here. And then we'll take it completely apart, resolder the parts back together correctly, and then put it back together and put it back inside the laptop. So I'm going to go ahead and do the resoldering now, and we'll come back shortly as soon as we're done with that, so I can show you putting it back into the laptop. Alright, so we've gone ahead and reattached the center post. Focus. There we go. So what we've got to do now is make sure that it's good. So what we use is one of these. It's called a multimeter. Hook this up, and this has a variety of functions on it. It'll do voltage, it'll do amperage, DC, AC, all kinds of fun stuff. But right now we have it in continuity mode, which pretty much just means that it runs a small voltage through whatever it is that you're trying to test, and it will make sure that it's actually properly conducting power. So we can't put this back together until we make sure that that center pin is conducting power correctly, and then both of the little plates on the sides of the center pin that interface with the sides of the barrel jack on the power plug are also working correctly. So that beeping sound means it's good. So let's check the other two real fast, and then we'll put the whole thing back together. Good. And not so good. And good. Cool. So let me get this put back together a little bit further, and we'll show you what that looks like. So on a lot of the more modern laptops, they've got an LED indicator light, and that will sit inside of this, and it's got two little plastic forms to make sure that it sits just so. And of course it's an LED, so you want to make sure that you get your polarity right when you put it back in. Then your little back plate will snap together. So what you've got on the bottom here, find something to point with. This works. So you've got LED pins there, and your base barrel jack pins, and then the center pin that we've just reconstructed right here in the center. Right? All of this gets neatly wrapped up in its own little metal housing. Now, in the process of taking these apart, two things are very important. On the way to getting it pulled apart, you don't want to do too much damage, because the outer jacket here that I've just snapped in place is actually part of the grounding plane of the laptop. And, you know, so if a surge comes by, or the battery puts out too much power, or just whatever have you, whatever battery-related power flow issues you might be having occur, that will actually get dissipated through that. So it's part of the very important grounding plane, like I said, of the laptop. The last little bit here will be the metal interface on the front, and we'll have this all put together, ready to go back in. So that's what that looks like put back together, right? Innocuous, ready to go. Now, we here use, over here you can see, This is actually a digitally controlled, temperature controlled hot air rework station. But if you look closely, you can see that these center holes are sort of like ventilation. They're pretty much added so that they cost less to manufacture the board there. But these holes down here at the bottom are the ones that are the actual solder interfaces. And of course, I accidentally left solder in them when I desoldered the thing. So I've got to clean that up, and then we'll get the hot air rework station all fired up. We'll get the solder back in place. We'll put it back in. Life will be good. So give me a second. We're going to do that. I'll show you what that's. And we're back. So we're going to get this fired up. I've got it running right at about 415 degrees Celsius. Give or take. It may or may not be the best temperature for that. It's a little on the higher end of the melting side of the solder that I'm using, but that's okay, because you want to, when you're doing this, you want to balance speed with temperature, because you want things to get hot and you want them to get hot quickly, but you don't want them to stay hot for very long, because as you can see on these boards here, this little driver circuit, these little MOSFETs down here, they can and will burn out. So you got to be a little careful with that. Like I said, balance your speed, dexterity, all that sort of thing. So don't play with fire, kids. Slowly, we'll heat this board up. We want to flip it and turn it, make sure we're getting even heating across the surface. If you don't, of course, the board can and will buckle. And given that it went into the laptop flat and came out of the laptop flat, we got to make sure that it goes back into the laptop still flat. So, it's just about correct there. Not get it hot enough on that go round. So there's a couple of senses that you can use here. Obviously the sense of sight is the best to watch what you're looking at, but if you smell burning silicone, it's probably warm enough. Of course I say probably, then I burned my hand. So we've got that put in. That looks like. Alright, so we've got our solder job all done. If you can see, I've cleaned that up so it's mostly flat and flush with the board. Right? We don't want anything to interfere once we put it back in the case. Now the last thing that we want to do before we put it back into the laptop that it came out of is go ahead and do one more connectivity test. Make sure that everything is still conducting properly, behaving the way that it should, and that all of the connections on the board are still mechanically and electrically sound. Start with the center post. Seems to be good. The side conduction plates seem to be good. And of course, the outer jacket, which is fine. So, we're doing well. I'll go get the rest of this unit, show you, we'll put that in, and everything will be great. So, just finishing this up, put the last few things back in. Of course, when you do these, you want to make sure that they're completely disconnected from all power and the batteries are out. Not quite correct. And naturally, when you're putting everything back in, make sure everything is seated correctly. And if you've got leftover screws, that's generally bad because they got to go somewhere, right? So I will finish this up real fast, and we can get to testing this to make sure that it went okay. Now, we here at MariettaLaptops.com do not typically endorse the aftermarket chargers. And sometimes customers will bring them in, and typically we will advise you, let us order you a new one, because HP made these things. HP knows what's best for these things. Well, in this case it's an HP anyway. And you're going to want to always have an OEM charger. Now, in this particular instance, it's not OEM. This is a Rocket Fish charger. And that's okay, you know, get you up and running between whatever you got going. But because it's a variable voltage and a variable amperage, it tends to put out a little on the high side of the voltage and a lot on the high side of the amperage. And you're just running more current through the laptop than the laptop really wants to take. They're designed to take a variable sort of voltage, but it's best to go with the manufacturer specifications. Now that being said, moment of truth here. Hey, we light up. So, beautifully done. That's put back together, and this is ready to go back home. All of these videos and all of these tutorials and examples are available on our website, MariettaLaptops.com, and of course for any and all of your laptop needs, we've got you covered.
White suit, white crew, white light gonna guide me through. Back door with the city that's proof. Back door with the city that's true. Get low, get down, get down, get low, get down,